Hello. Welcome back to my channel. I am Monae and you are watching Life as Monae. In one of my recent videos, I did a thriller haul and I will link that up in the cards for you guys. In that video, I told you guys that I was searching for new favorites outside of my normal comforting genre of fantasy, and that started with me being on the hunt for a good thriller. I am also on the hunt for good romance books, and surprisingly, as much trouble as I've had finding good thrillers, I'm having an even harder time, but that's another story for a future date. So today we're going to talk about the thrillers that I've read recently on my hunt to find a new favorite. I've already posted a review on my channel of me talking about The Woman in the Window, Falling, The Silent Patient, and The Maidens, and that was pretty much hit or miss. I only had one good one out of all of those books, and that was pretty much just Falling. That's the only one that I would really recommend and that I had a good time with, and I ended up giving that book 5 stars. And so yeah, we're gonna talk about the ones that I've read recently and see if we have any new favorites from that. So the first book is not one that I own physically, it's one that I only listen to on audio, and that is going to be My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. In this book, our main character is a guy, and I'm gonna call him Tobias. It's kind of like an inside joke for the people who read the book. But Tobias is married to a woman, and her name is Millicent. Him and Millicent get serotonin from committing murders, and so Tobias sets them up and lures them in, and then Millicent normally does the crime, and then they just find someone new to kill, I guess, again, starting over. And so we open the book with them kind of committing a murder together, except they get a phone call from the babysitter, and one of their kids is sick, and so Tobias leaves Millicent there to finish off the deed. We find out in the book that I've actually never read the synopsis for this one, but what I'm about to say about the book happens in the very beginning, like literally the first 20 to 30 pages. So I'm gonna say that it's not a spoiler. But I also have not read the Goodreads synopsis of this book, so let's just hope I don't ruin it. So they've discovered the body and it's all over the news, and Tobias finds out that the body has been moved from the location where him and his wife originally dragged it to. He knows the body of the girl, but he's not sure how Millicent moves her body from one place to another. And you also find out that this incident with Tobias was supposed to have happened over a year ago, but the coroner tells the news people that this woman just recently passed 2 to 3 weeks ago. And so Tobias is a little confused because he's like, not only did the body move from where it was supposed to have been, that happened last year, and this woman, she's only been gone for about 2 weeks. So where has she been for the last year? Because Millicent has still been showing up to PTA meetings, still cooking dinner every night, still cleaning, still dropping the kids off, still going to soccer practice. She's a real estate agent, I believe, in this book, so she's still selling houses. Like, well, where did you find the time to torture someone? We follow Tobias as he starts to question a lot of things about Millicent and whether or not she's being honest with him or telling him the truth, and that's pretty much where the story goes. Let me just read the synopsis, because if I spoiled it, I'm going to have to remove this entire clip from the video, and that would just be bad. Yeah, the synopsis actually doesn't give away a lot of information. It just tells you that they commit a murder together, and then they keep secrets. So all I did was describe the murder. Yay! Again, this happens literally in like the first 2 chapters of the book, so at least you know how the murder goes down, and now you're more inclined to pick it up. I enjoy Samantha Downing's writing a lot. I like her character work. I like that she writes from a male point of view, and it doesn't get on my nerves because both of the books that I've read from her are centered around male characters that I don't find annoying, and I actually find them kind of amusing. I had a good time with the book. I would recommend that people read it. I ended up giving the book 4 out of 5 stars. And I feel like Samantha Downing at this point is going to be an auto by author for me, because the 2 books that I've read by her I thoroughly enjoyed, and they have been the better parts of the thriller genre that I've read so far. And so that brings me to the next book that I read by Samantha Downing, and that is going to be For Your Own Good. We follow this professor or this teacher at the school, and he works at a very prestigious school, and his name is Teddy Croucher. Teddy is annoyed with his students' lack of perfection. He wants them to be all around good people, good characters, not just striving to get good grades or to get into high-end, top of the line colleges, but also to be good people. And so he will flunk a student here or there, even though they wrote a really good paper, just because they're jackasses and he wants to teach them a lesson. And also we have parents of these students who pretty much feel like they can open their wallet to buy their children's way into success. And Teddy's like, I will not be bought. And so you kind of follow him along this journey of him being annoyed with people and people being annoyed with him, and students trying to get in his good graces, and him being determined to hate a couple of students. And along the way, there are bodies dropping like flies, and there's people investigating what's happening, and Teddy is kind of like a suspect for a couple of murders, but you know, you gotta prove it first. So this book definitely aired on the side of like satire, parody, humorous fiction. I don't know exactly why it was marketed as a thriller per se, because you definitely know earlier on who killed who, and the suspense only lasts for like a short period of time. I found myself kind of giggling at the things that was happening in this book because it just felt so melodramatic, so overdrawn out, and I love shows like that on TV. I don't know if you guys have, so if any of you have ever seen The Politician on Netflix, the characters are so overdramatic and like so like overzealous. That's the word I'm looking for. The characters are so overzealous and so focused and like harking on whatever it is that they're focusing on, to the point where like they can seem very satire. And so that's the feel that I got from this book. I love The Politician. That's one of my favorite shows on Netflix. I'm looking forward to the new season. This was a perfect like in between. I want to feel the same type of feelings that I feel when I watch The Politician, but getting it in a book form. And yeah, so don't pick it up because you think it's a thriller. Don't pick it up for the suspense or the mystery. It's literally just supposed to be a fun kind of like parody type book, the same way that maybe The Good Place would be, or The Politician, both of which you can find on Netflix. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I totally didn't pick up the book the whole time I was talking about it, so yeah, this is the cover of For Your Own Good. The next book that I have, let me pick it up before I forget again. It was in my hand the whole time. They Never Learned by Lane Fargo. In this book, we are following a professor who works at a university, and she is also a serial killer, and she targets specifically men and boys who have gotten away with rape or sexual assault and pretty much just violence against women. Let me read the synopsis of this one, because I also did read the synopsis of this one, and I've already kind of like aired on the side of spoilery in the beginning part of this video. Let me just read this real quick. Yeah, the synopsis of this one actually gives away way too much, so we're not gonna do that. Just know that we have a professor at a university, and she is there and she's targeting people, and pretty much we have investigators who come to the campus because they're looking into the murders and they're trying to figure out if these murders coincide with each other. There's also another professor at the school who's looking into the murders. Our professor, Scarlett, that we're following, is pretty much trying to accomplish her goals without being caught. There are some trigger warnings for this book. We also follow another college student named Carly. I did not love how Carly reacted to one of the things that occurred in this book. I feel like when you are dealing with someone who has just suffered sexual violence, I think that there's a certain amount of sensitivity that should be taken. And I know that while Carly is a college student and was very, very young, she was just trying to be helpful. And I feel like in a lot of ways, she ended up doing a little bit of harm instead of being as helpful as she intended for her to be. I don't want to spoil it, but I do want to say that like that's really the only part about this book that I did not love, because I feel like that is just not how you want to react to someone telling you that they just suffered from sexual assault. And also, not everybody's going to want to scream it from the rooftops. Some women don't want the doctor's visit and to go to the dean and to have all these things happening to them, or to go to the courts. Like, some people just deal with it in their own way, shape, or form. I think that is important to acknowledge that people process these things in different ways, and that when you're trying to be there to help them, to just be mindful that you're not also causing them harm or forcing them to do things that they are not at a point of being ready for yet. But yeah, that's the only thing that I did not love about the book. Other than that, it was a really good time. In terms of like a thriller, I do recommend this. I recommended this to my friend and they read it solely on audio and they had a good time. I will say that like if you're thinking about listening to it on audio, I do recommend that. So the last book that I have is The Push. I loved this book. It made me uncomfortable. It made me angry. It made me nervous. This is a thriller that put me through several types of emotions that I haven't really felt since like reading The Falling. But that was more so like adrenaline, excitement kind of thing. This one upset me to my core. It seems like in every video I talk about 4 thrillers, so maybe I'll just keep that trend going. Of the 4 that I talked about in my previous video, Falling definitely was the winner out of those. Of the 4 that I've talked about in this video, The Push is definitely the winner. We are following this character named Blythe. Blythe comes from a mother who never had a mother. So you follow in this book, you have multiple timelines where you get to see how Blythe was raised by her mother and how her mother was raised by her grandmother, and how it's just been generations of trauma and abuse and just no type of motherly love or nurturing that's happened. And Blythe is nervous about becoming a mother herself, but she's determined to be different. I feel like the synopsis of this book, I did read the synopsis of this book gives away way too much, so I'm not going to go off that. I'll just stick with what I'm about to say. Blythe meets the love of her life, and he's excited to have children with her and start a family with her, and she's like not really excited about having a kid, but she's like, you know what, I'm determined to be better than my mom was, because technically her mother and her grandmother were terrible, and she grew up in a very traumatic and abusive home in terms of physical, emotional, mental abuse all the way around. And then her mother just disappeared, and she hasn't ever seen her since. And so our main character Blythe has never truly dealt with the void and a lot of the damage that her mother has done in her life. And there's no grandmother either, because that grandmother is also not around. And so you follow, like, you see the generational trauma as you follow those stories within the book, and you get to understand Blythe on like a deep and personal level. So when you see her doing certain decisions, I'm not justifying them at all, but you see the roots of where they came from a lot. And you also see when she's absolutely trying, and then also when she's kind of reverting back to the things that she was raised with. So Blythe has a daughter, and her daughter just does not connect in any way, shape, or form. Her maternal instinct is literally just not kicking on, and she's surrounded by women who are like, yes, I love my kids, I live and breathe for my kids, they're my light, they're everything. And she looks at her daughter and she's like, why don't I feel that? I am supposed to feel that. And so things start to happen, and she's telling her husband, like, something's wrong with my connection with my child. And he's like, it's all in your head. And then things start to go completely south. It goes from it being all in her head to him saying, you're not trying, you're not loving her hard enough, you're not being there good enough, you're like, what's wrong with you, why can't you be a mother? And it's still taboo today. It's becoming more normal, but it's still kind of taboo to admit that not every woman is meant to be a mother. Not every woman has maternal instincts. And so you see from like the 1950s all the way up until present day, generations of women who don't know how to really talk about the disconnect they feel from their kid, and like the postpartum depression, and just not even postpartum depression. Sometimes women are just depressed having kids, period. That is discussed so immensely within this book. And so as Blythe is struggling to connect with her daughter, she gets this idea later on that, you know, maybe I just need to try again, maybe I need to have a son. And so she does have a son, and something very traumatic happens to the entire family, to where they end up breaking apart. And Blythe is like determined and totally convinced, although she didn't come from a good mother, and maybe she wasn't a good mother, this child is also like evil, sinister. And so this child is like out to get Blythe, and she feels like maybe she's a reincarnation of all the curses and anger and like spitefulness that happened through the maternal lineage in her family. And that's pretty much all that I'm going to say about the book. If you're thinking about picking it up, I highly suggest it. The Goodreads review of this is really high. I think there's like 100,000 or over 100,000 reviews, and it's still sitting at 4 stars. I seen 4 people in the book community read this book, none of which are mothers, and they thoroughly enjoyed it. They gave it 4 to 5 stars. But I feel like as a mother, this book hit in so many ways, especially because I did experience my own postpartum depression, and there were some moments where like I really related to her, and then some moments where I was like, girl, you're tripping. You're really wild, you need to talk to somebody, you need to get some help. I think what makes this book so much more impactful is that you follow Blythe from when she's in college meeting the love of her life, all the way up until her daughter being like 13 years old. So it's little things here and there that happen over the years that nobody's connecting and nobody's paying attention to but Blythe, because it's in Blythe's mind that like, this kid, something's off, something's wrong with my daughter, something's wrong with my child, but no one is going to listen to her because she can't prove what she thinks is happening. And on top of that, she experienced her own type of postpartum depression, so they just kind of see her as a bad mother, and no one's really listening to her, and they're like, a kid wouldn't be this way, a kid wouldn't do this. Like, you know, you're just, it's all in your head. And again, like, you're like, nah, because 5 years ago she pushed that girl down the slide, and last year she did this, and 6 months ago, but you sound crazy when you're like, when she was 3 she did this, and when she was 5 she did this, and when she was 9 she did this. It sounds like, you know, that's not really a case you can really present to the court. So we're stuck in Blythe's mind, and we see what's happening, but it's hard to paint her as an unreliable character because you don't feel like she's mentally unstable. You get her past, and you get to understand her a lot, and you know that she suffers from a lot of PTSD in her past, but you don't feel like she's had some type of like psychotic or mental break. So you're like, despite everything that you've done and that you've been through, I don't think that you're wrong. I don't think that you're wrong. Like, you guys can both be right. Like, Blythe probably is a bad mother, but this probably is a demon child. So yeah, out of all the 4 that I've mentioned today, this one is a fave. I do recommend it. I even know someone who read this book, and they're like 18, 19 years old, and they still enjoyed it. I think there's something in here for everyone. Literally all stages of motherhood is discussed in this book. And I told you guys, as we continue on this journey of me trying to find new favorites, I would let you guys know what's up in the queue next, so you guys can look forward to that. And so the next books that I plan to read are going to be Survive the Night, Sometimes I Lie, The Night Swim, and probably one more, maybe Temper by Lane Fargo. I'll put that up in this corner. Those are going to be the next 4 books that I set out to read. And so you guys can look forward to another episode of me trying to find new favorites in the thriller genre. And I'm also exploring finding new favorites in sci-fi as well, and romance, as I've mentioned earlier. We're just kind of going through a bunch of genres. If you have some thrillers that you absolutely love, you adore it, and you recommend, that you haven't seen me haul or review, or you haven't seen me plan to review it, please leave it down in the comment section, because we're on a hunt, guys, and we're gonna get there, right? We got two decent thrillers so far, and I feel like that's progress. It's unfortunate that I had to read like 10 books to get 2 really good ones, but diamond in the rough. Thanks you guys for watching my video, and I will see you next time.